So we left off here last time, and what we did was we created this nice render template test function to actually go and parse all of our templates, including the layouts, and store them in this variable myCache. And myCache is a map. And I can look up values in that map by a string, and the string in this case, the thing I look up values in the map by, happens to be the name of the template. So something like aboutpage.tmpl or home.page.tmpl. And once I look them up, I actually get a pointer to that ready-to-use template, which is exactly what I need to render pages to the site. So this actually creates that cache, that map that I can use, that I need to be able to use. Where can I use that? Well, the logical place to use that, of course, is here in this render template function. But the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of all of this code that did nothing more than show that we were building the cache properly. That's of no value to us, so let's get rid of it. So we can get rid of that there, and then I have to reinitialize error because it's the first time I'm using it. And there's a line down here where I can get rid of that as well. All right. So this is the logical place to use that map of templates, our template cache. So I need to get this value that's produced right here up here. So the obvious thing to do is to call this function. But first, let's give it a more meaningful name. Rather than calling it render template test, which is not a great name, let's call it create template cache. And I'm not ever using this response writer as a parameter, so I'm going to delete that for now. I might need it later on. If I do, I'll add it back in. So up here, I probably should give this a comment, so let's do that now to get it out of the way. Creates a template cache as a map. All right. I need to call it here. That's all I need to do. And this takes no parameters now because we got rid of the response writer, and it returns a map and an error. So it returns two things. So let's just call it. Simple enough. We'll call our template cache TC, and we'll check for an error, and that's assigned the value of create template cache. And then we have to check for an error. If error is not equal to nil, then I actually want to die at this point. And there's better error handling we'll be looking at later on, but for the purposes of what we're trying to do right now, we're just going to die. So I'll say log.fatal and an error. And that stops the application at this point because we can't get our template cache, therefore we can't show any pages. There's no point in going any further. So assuming we get past this, which we will because we know this works, how are we going to actually do something with an individual template? Well, we pull that value out of the map. So I could just say my template is equal to and pull it out of the map. So my map is called TC, and I could pull the template name, which we know is called TMPL, the variable here. So we could copy that and paste it in here. And that will actually work. But what if the template I'm trying to pass doesn't exist? So I'm passing, instead of passing about.page.tmpl or home.page.tmpl, what if the parameter is something like yellow.page.tmpl, which doesn't exist anywhere on the map? Well, one of the very common ways of checking for this sort of thing is actually to assign two variables here. So what will happen is if the template I'm trying to pull out exists, then t will have a value, and this will be set to true. But if it doesn't exist, this won't have any useful value, and this will be to false. So this will be set to false. So I can check for that by saying if not okay, then what do I want to do? Well, if I can't find the template, again, for the purposes of what we're doing right now, I'm just going to die. So if we get past this, then we have our template cache. If we get past this, then we have the template we want to use. So how do we use a template that's not read from disk? What we were doing before, down here, and all of this stuff we're going to get rid of very shortly, is we actually read the template from the disk, then we parse the template, and we're done. In this case, we can't do that. And we can't do that for a very simple reason, because we haven't read it from disk. So we need to handle it a little bit differently. And what I'm going to do here is create something called a bytes buffer. And I'm going to give it a name, buff, and that's going to be assigned the value of new bytes.buffer. So this is a buffer that will hold the information. All it's going to do is hold bytes. And I need to put that value, that parsed template that I currently have in memory, into some bytes. So all I'm going to do is very similar to what we did before. I'm going to not check for an error at this point, equals t, my template, execute, and I'm going to execute to the buffer the value of that template. So I'm saying take this template that I have, execute it, don't pass it any data, and store the value in this buff variable. Now I have exactly what I need to write to my response writer. So I can just say buff.write, try that again, buff.write, and I'm going to write to my response writer. And that should write everything to the template, which means I can get rid of this. Now this, if I look at write to, what does it return? It actually returns an error. So technically I should say error equals, and then check for that error. If error is not equal to nil, then, and I can just print the error. What do I have here? Oh, it gets 2 returns. And what does it return? It returns, and oh yes, the number of bytes. And I don't care about the number of bytes, so I'll get rid of that, just ignore it. And if there's an error, at this point I don't want the application to die, I'm just going to write to the error log. So I'll just say format.println error writing template to browser followed by the error. All right. In theory, this should work because I've cleaned things up a little bit. And again, we're going to do improved error handling later on. But right now, I just want to get templates written to the screen. So let's try this. Let's open our terminal, clear the screen, and go run command web star.go. Let's see if it runs. That looks good. Let's go over to our web browser, and I'm on localhost 8080, and the last time I was here, it just gave me a blank screen, so this time I hope to see the home page. And there it is. Now what about going to the About page? That's good as well. That's perfect. Okay, it's almost perfect, because if you think about it, we've actually, although we're now using layouts, and you can see that the layout's working properly, and if I view the source from the actual page, this part comes out of the layout document, this part comes out of the layout document, and this is the only thing that's being rendered from the About template. So this text here is exactly what I see here. So everything seems to be working. But let's look at our code again. Render.go. Here we are. What are we really doing? Every single time we go to render any page on the site, this function is getting called, render template. And it receives a response writer, and it receives the name of the template I want to render. Then, every single time we open a page on the site, we're building this template cache. That seems really inefficient. Before we made these changes, we were just loading a single template, parsing it, and writing it to the screen, to the browser window. But now, every single time we render a single page on the site, we're actually parsing all of our template files. Now, Go is very fast, and you're not going to notice this if you don't have any appreciable amount of traffic on your site, but it is grossly inefficient, and there's got to be a better way to do this. So, in the next lecture, we'll figure out a better way to do that.